Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. Thanks for joining us today. We are in Studio A here at Sweetwater with Rival Sons. Great to have you guys here.
Thanks for having us.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, you guys got a gig tomorrow night at the Clyde.
Looking forward
downtown.
to it.
Yeah, super cool venue.
Great.
That's what I hear. I'm looking forward to seeing it.
So Jay, Scott, Mike, Dave, Todd, great to have you guys here. Appreciate you coming in. I was fascinated to look back on the band's history and see the connection to MySpace.
Dating us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that. Tell us how the band came together.
Well, gosh, Miley can help me with this. Where do we really start? I don't know. Do we include MySpace in it?
Oh yeah, we had a MySpace, but that was before we had Jay. So
Right.
the band, as it currently is, started in 2009 or 2008 when we got Jay. So
The way MySpace plays into it is we had a different singer. Me and Miley were playing together, and we had somebody else we were working with, and somebody had come out to a show. Another singer had come out and said, "I want to be the new singer. I want to replace the guy that you have now." And we went, okay, so I checked it out. And when I checked this site out, I thought, oh, he's great. I don't know if he's perfect. And on this dude's site was a link to this guy that I didn't know. And I just really was just like we do, mindlessly thumbing through it. And went, oh yeah, I've heard of this guy, I think. And I hit it, and I heard Jay doing a song of his called Satan is a Woman. And I just immediately kind of went, oh, this is a fellow that I've been like looking to, this is a voice I've been wanting to work with. And I called Miley up immediately and said, this is the guy. We're firing the guy we're working with because this is the guy we want to work with.
Right.
I know for sure. And Miley had known Jay for years and years, and I had no idea. For all I know, he could have lived in Maine. I just know I heard a guy online that this is the guy. We'll find out. We'll work it out. Find out where he is.
Right.
So he ended up contacting Jay, and through many phone calls and over weeks, we finally got on the phone and talked about rock and roll. And I said
Jay would never join the band too.
He was a solo artist,
Somehow
doing his own thing.
Right. Yeah. Like I bring that up because what's so important with a band is getting both musical personalities and personalities
Sure.
to click together. And you guys seem to really lock. The rhythm section is so tight, and then the guitars and the vocals and the keyboards, you guys are just so locked together. Talk a little bit about how you develop that. Is that something that just happens, or do you work on that in rehearsal, or how do you get so tight?
The music comes first. The music comes first, and then it has to gel in that sense. Otherwise, there's just no need. You know, there's no need to have a relationship. You know, you build all of the social stuff and like becoming a family and all of that. That's all predicated on it working musically. You know, you throw any group of people together and put them on a tour bus or a submarine or whatever, and you force them to become this microcosm, you're always going to have the different dynamics. But since it works musically, you always make it work out on the other end, you know. And with that, you develop all of the other dynamics in the relationship. They flourish and they get stronger.
And just like any relationship, sometimes you just gel naturally right out of the gate with people more, you know? And sometimes you don't. And so when I first played with Miley, the first time I ever played with him, there was an audition for drummers, and I had actually hired a different drummer and gave him the job, essentially. Like, oh, I'm gonna work with this guy. He was great. He's kind of a known guy, was on records. And a friend said, you gotta try this last guy out. Miley came out. Of course, Miley didn't learn any of the songs at all. But he had the most fun playing them, and I immediately felt like, oh, I'm definitely going to do it with this guy. This is like, I have a connection with him that I don't care if he doesn't know the songs. We had fun, and we could have conversations musically. We could speak to each other. And similarly, after talking with Jay, we had Jay out. It was just like that. Jay only really wanted to learn maybe one song and didn't want to do any songs either. So nobody wanted to do any of the existing material. But we got together and we could have conversations. And I think we started playing without really talking too much in the room and played for like an hour without speaking to each other, just moving through musical sections and improvising and just having that conversation. And for me, where I was coming from, that I knew that was what was most important. If I could find guys like that,
Right.
it is always about the songs, but there's an underlying thing that is, as a musician, for me, more important as a performing musician. Like, are we connecting and listening to each other? We always said this, and enjoying each other and kind of able to predict where we're going to go. Yeah. So I think we had that naturally.
Yeah. I might add that we had a rehearsal room with Veruca Salt, and we spent the better part of about 18 months, 2-3 times a week playing.
That's the other
for
part.
Hours.
That's the other part.
That's the kind of physical part of the other side of the coin of what Jay was saying. It's about the music, but it's also, we went and put the sweat in, and for hours. We had a cool little studio that we shared with Veruca Salt. That was fun.
Really fun.
Yeah.
That's I think that all bands have to do. I think they go through that, that shaping process. It's like you decide, okay, we're going to do this, but you have to put in those hours and earn that sweat equity so that, like the chops have to be there, but even that's not enough. You have to develop, as Scott was saying, like that little bit of telepathy and telegraphing where everybody's at, and understand their, for everybody in the band, understand their vernacular so that you get to know their bag of tricks. So then you put all that together and you know that there's a certain amount of combinations, but then you bring in the X factor of where everybody gets on their heels a little bit, and that's when the magic happens.
You can hear that in all your favorite bands, right? You can, all the greatest bands you can just see that they're finishing each other's sentences. Yeah. And that's exciting. Yeah.
Quick addendum. I spent hours learning the songs for Scott. He's just very picky. I worked really hard on learning those songs.
Right.
I just wanted to note that for the record.
On the record, right.
You did a great job. You got the job.
MySpace was around a while ago.
So Dave, you came into the band in 2012.
13.
13?
Yeah.
So there was already the existing unit that you came and had to lock in with.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, that was easy because I'm good at doing that. But
The best thing you could have said.
There you go.
being honest. No, it was an easy fit, man. These guys were already friends. I'd already seen that band play a lot. I've known Jay the longest, and then Miley after that. So we were all kind of in a similar music scene, Long Beach, and then him and Huntington Beach, not so much, kind of in a different world. But so I already kind of knew their musical language coming in.
Okay.
So it was pretty easy transition, to be honest.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And I think the first time we rehearsed, I think everybody kind of felt the same way. It was just like, this is going to be.
It was
just fine.
Yeah, it was an easy decision. Within 5 minutes of finding out that the old bass player, he just needed a life change, Within 5 minutes, it was like
In an airport.
Yeah, in an airport.
In Amsterdam, at the end of a tour, we're just beat down.
I send the text to Miley and Scott, and I just go, Dave Bestie. Everybody's like, yeah. That's an easy one.
And then I got a call at 8 a.m. from Jay, and I was like, that's weird.
We actually, a big, I guess, tip of the hat or whatever to Dave is we got tons of people that wanted the job when the word got out. Tons of people reached out to us, people that were known and working, people all over the world really just were writing us and sitting and letting me audition. I'll fly out, I'll come in. We actually didn't audition anybody. We actually just said, it's Dave. And
Right.
we just hit Dave up, and that's what it was.
Right. Oh, that's cool. When it works, it works.
I didn't have to learn any songs. Just came in.
Easy. So Todd, then you came in on keyboards for touring initially.
Yeah, in 2014, the band released Great Western Valkyrie, and Ike Owens, rest in peace, he had a lot of parts on the more than other albums. Pretty key heavy, and so I get a call from Miley, because I've known Miley for years, and he's like, hey, we're going to be auditioning some keyboard players, and I was living in New York at the time, and he was like, why don't you come out? And I was like, absolutely, and went out to California, and then had a couple days rehearsals, and I got the gig to tour, and after that, it was like 2 weeks later, I'm in Paris playing Le Grand Journal.
Nice.
And and 8 years ago. So yeah, it's been a fantastic
And unlike
ride.
Miley, he came in really prepared.
He also did a YouTube video because he was on the other East Coast.
that's right.
And he made a little private YouTube video that we all got to watch. It was very endearing. And he had his keyboard, and he's like, "All right, here I'm going to do this one," you know.
And I had my dog at the time sitting on my lap, like snorting the whole time and everything. I was like,
All those years
Just
back
looks-
when the beard was only this big.
yeah, the beard was a baby beard.
Right. That's awesome. That's awesome.
It was actually most people's biggest beard. At that point.
So you guys mentioned the music, and obviously the songs are critical to the success of any band. Tell us a little bit about how you go about writing the songs.
Well, there's a really just a few ways
Yeah.
we've done it. One way is me and Jay will write alone. I will write alone. We'll write together. The whole band will write together in the studio. We work really hand in glove with our producer, Dave Cobb. He contributes as well. So we'll either bring stuff in and have stuff to hash out on the floor, or we'll pick stuff up just in the room. You know,
Right.
I might have a riff, Jay might have a one part or something, and we'll kind of embellish it and build it out.
I'll bring in a song, and then it's kind of like, formed verses and typically a chorus, and go, okay, well, let's Rival Sons that, finish writing it, or and going about it that way. And I find that when we write in the studio, for the most part, because we made so many records that way, where we show up with nothing and basically start climbing a rope and light the bottom on fire. And so we would do that for a couple of weeks. We made some great records that way. But more recently, we took a very different approach in giving ourselves more time to reflect and to breathe, and just leaving room for inspiration of a different type. And I think that we did that because we had already done it that other way so many times. But when we write in the studio, it'll be a musical thing, and then I'll take the music and then compose a story melody, and all of that stuff. And it's interesting because the type of inspiration that comes out of that necessity, knowing that there's music and going, I have to be inspired. I have to find an identity. I have to do this because the music's so good. Right. It's a really different thing of just throwing your pole in the water and fishing, but it's yielded some really, really great songs over the years that way, like forcing yourself to stay on the bull, so to speak.
Right. One of the things that stands out to me as I listen through the albums is you're a big sounding band. Obviously it's a massive rock sound, but what really contributes to the band sounding big is the dynamics that you allow for the acoustic guitar parts, the keyboard parts, the silent parts in there. Talk a little bit about that, because a lot of bands miss that, the dynamics in rock music. It's full on all the time, and then nothing sounds big.
That's exactly right. I mean, you'll hear this in every genre of music. The space is just as important as the sound.
Absolutely.
So I think we've worked really hard to make sure we are creating space, especially with a vocalist like Jay, a singer like Jay. That's a real instrument. You don't want to crowd it too much. A lot of times you want to everybody back away a little bit and just let this thing exist. And like you said, when we come up behind him, it sounds like a big wave crashing.
Well, and you don't tell a story full of expletives. You need to have, you got to have dimension to it. And I think that we knew from the beginning, if you write something, if you write a song that is like very, very linear, and we'll do that from time to time, because there's a place for those type of songs. But if you do that constantly, like, you're going to have to play these songs every goddamn night. And giving yourself variety and giving yourself a real story to tell. And furthermore, like, giving yourself a story to interpret and to reinterpret and to reinterpret it again. Right. Giving yourself that room and that wide berth is, I think, very important to staying engaged, you know, and us getting on stage and it being far more than just a recital. You know, hopefully we're going to go somewhere special together that night or within that song. But leaving room for that, it's like, it's a change of scenery that's always welcome. You know, every time we hit like the pre-chorus to Feral Roots or something, it's a scene change within a song. And it gives you just like a very short, you know, respite before you get into a larger chorus.
Right. Right. One of the other elements of that is there's a lot of swagger in the groove and the drive of the band. But I was interested to see some of your influences. I saw names like Prince and Sly and the Family Stone and Joni Mitchell and, you know, a really wide variety. And when I listen back, there's a lot of groove going on with the bass and the drums. Can you guys talk a little bit about how you lock together and where that groove comes from?
I'm born and raised on R&B, and my dad was into bands that had good studio musicians and like Steely Dan, and studied with Clyde Stubblefield from James Brown. And I've always been into funk and groove and R&B and South American various percussion, island percussion, African percussion. So I'm drawing from a completely like groove based you know, so I'm glad you hear it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very apparent as you listen through. But the bass has to lock with that. So when you're listening to his groove, are you listening to the hi-hat, the kick drum, the snare? What are you focusing on as a bass player locking into that groove?
I'm just listening to everything, you know. I'm listening to how he's feeling rather than any specific element of what he's playing, you know. A lot of it's emotional, to be honest. You know, you're just, as a bass player, you're sort of, I've always kind of looked at it like these guys are the boat and he's the dock and I'm the rope that kind of keeps them together, right? It's kind of the role of the bass player. So
you just make that up.
I think it's great
Amazing.
the way you've talked about it in the past, Dave, is like Scott tends to play ahead. I tend to play behind.
Yeah.
And Miley's in there and like you're trying to glue it. You're always like trying to bring everybody back in and stay in the middle.
I'm a shepherd, basically.
Elmer.
But no, the truth is this: is that when you have a really good drummer that's playing really funky, it's easy as a bass player to kind of do that too. If you don't have that, it's not so simple, you know.
Right.
You still can do it, but you're trying to make up for somebody else. But when you got somebody that's really funky all the time, it makes my job easy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, these rhythm and blues and soul things that Miley are talking about, those are indicated throughout our whole catalog. They're pretty centralized influences, you know? Like, well, people give other influences that are more obvious to them. You know, they'll say something like Led Zeppelin for Pressure and Time, but for us, making the recording, that is, we're indicating way more like Temptations. There's like way more soul influences in that kind of a tune, and it's like that, I think, on a lot of our songs.
And not to say, totally agree with that, but it's also not to say, like the Led Zeppelin influence. That's
we're
course.
lovers.
Yeah,
we're lovers of the band.
That's definitely there, and I think that. And that's an obvious one, as a rock and roll band.
Right.
But drawing from like the Sly and the Family Stone, and like it always being, always having that grease, that because it's really such a different grease than like Led Zeppelin or most rock bands. But I think that for us being an American rock band that's also has like British rock in our lineage, but then taking it back and then reincorporating this deeply American grease, from these other bands, whether it's James Brown, the Temptations, or Sly and the Family Stone. It's great because it brings it back around that way.
I always looked at those classic bands of the 60s and 70s, and even as a young kid immediately went, they didn't just make this up. What were they doing? And that's exactly what they were doing. They were hearing American soul, they were hearing R&B and blues, and they were electrifying it in their own way and doing it that way. And I said, we should just also do that. We should go back and like kind of get that less that like undistilled like raw influence there.
Yeah, there's actually that's where my next question was going to be about that, because there's that kind of first layer of the British rock, but behind that you guys have also talked about Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and some of the original blues players as well, and that shows up. I mean, there's a heavy blues influence in what you guys are doing also. You're bringing together a pretty wide range of influences there.
I think for sure, what's really neat, with our writing, Scott and I we'll talk about it sometimes, but what's really great is, we just had the 10th anniversary of the Pressure and Time record. That was a seminal record for us. It allowed us to break overseas, and so we re-released the album on our own label, and then we had to go out and here in the United States, and then all through Europe and in the UK. We played that album in its entirety. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of like putting on an old suit, but it still fits. But getting the opportunity to just focus on those particular tracks. When it comes to blues, it's great to see where we are now versus where we were then, because we're actually approaching the blues in a very different way. It's and the influence is worn in a very different way, and it makes me happy when I see this, because it shows personal growth. When I look at where we are and what we've done together, and that it's not just the same old thing.
Mm-hmm. Right. With a guitar-based heavy blues rock band, slotting the keyboards in there can sometimes be a challenge. You got to find your space.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got to allow space to let everything speak. Talk a little bit about that, how you approach your parts and the sounds you use.
Well, Rival Sons is like banging drums, loud guitars, soaring vocals, and a bass line that just keeps you grooving, right? So my job is basically, it's a colorful luxury. So I just add a little bit of sounds, like through a mellotron, then through different Rhodes or Whirlies, and also the B3. And it's just putting in that color perfectly. So I just complement everything that's going on. Sometimes I have my moments of where, you stand out, do a couple licks here and there, but it's all about providing a really tasteful color, knowing when to back off. And I think that's a lot of things that happens with keyboard players, is they want to, show off and the ego gets in the way, but you have to learn, I guess, as you mature as a musician, to know when your parts are needed. Some of the past albums and stuff, there really wasn't any keyboards there. I mean, there were some here and there and stuff. And so when we revisit those, I don't play on some of the songs because that song doesn't need it. Mm-hmm. So I just, bang on the tambourine or something, or just dance around and bang my beard around. So.
I love that, man. Colorful luxury. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. Todd plays a real role, certainly live, in being another layer of glue. Mm-hmm. Just another colorful luxury.
I like that. So I have two business questions for you guys. I saw something, you mentioned the 10th anniversary. You guys own all of your albums, is that correct?
Most of them.
Oh, yeah, most
the
of
last
them.
The last record we
which is not usual for a lot of bands, especially working with major labels and things. Yeah. What led you to want to do that?
What would lead you to not want to do that?
We're all career musicians. We've all had record deals and before this band, and I think that it was just built in. We talked about it, about wanting to maintain control over our catalog, as best as we could. Mm-hmm. And I think that right out of the gate, that was part of our whole ethos.
Sure. We signed to a smaller indie label at the beginning of our career, so we knew we could maybe make that move instead of going directly to Atlantic or Universal or Sony, where it's just they hardline it. They have these big attorneys and they have big agendas. That's what they do. Like even now we're with Atlantic and they don't make those deals the same way. Going to this indie allowed us to go, yes, we want to do it with you. Yes, let's try this together, but we will license it. And they agreed.
Yeah, and it worked for us. I think that from the beginning, you know, having a band, it's artistic, and songwriting, everything's artistic. But then you have to put your business hat on as soon as you hit the road, because it comes down to economics. And I think that signing with an independent label like Earache Records out of Nottingham in the UK, we were able to continue with the, you know, low overhead, high output way of doing things, so that we could, you know, take as little as we could up front, so that we could recoup. Because you know, all of our friends that make records and everything, 99% of them haven't recouped
just never
on their
recoup.
records, and we were able to recoup, and
yeah.
be completely.
We never took big advances. Even when we signed, we got enough money advanced that we literally bought a van to go tour. We just had enough money to like continue doing the career, you know,
Right.
and build it. Like Jay said, we had deals before. I had signed a really big deal to a label and got a bunch of money. And you know what? That record didn't come out. We spent all the money, and it just didn't go anywhere. So I have the analogy of like digging a well with this band. I didn't want their free water. I wanted to dig our own well. We could always go back to that well and get our own water. Right. And that's what we've done. And I say this to young people, anybody watching it, new musicians that don't know this. Try to keep your records. That's important. You're not going to sell millions of records. That's not what's happening these days. Keep your publishing. These are the things the industry wants to take from you, because of the things that become valuable. Even if you're not that famous, you could have had a song that just gets picked up for a commercial or a movie or another artist. Keep your publishing, keep your records. That's how you're gonna live. Keep your merchandising. Keep all that stuff as long as you can. That's the new paradigm. That's how we survive, you know, not selling 14 million records.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So along those lines, my last question or my last word is coffee. Tell me about the coffee.
Oh, with the rival sound.
I was like, yes, 2 grapes, 2 sugars. Are we offering coffee right now?
I'll take it when you get this, Jay, because I'm really the mastermind behind the coffee.
The Rival Sons coffee. Well,
That was really out of nowhere, man.
Yeah, we aren't necessarily coffee barons. I'm a pretty compulsive coffee drinker, but we just put out 2 different varieties. You know, one is from Mexico, the Chiapas, and then the other one is from Ethiopia, and that Ethiopian is one of my favorite. That's one of my favorite coffees I think I've ever had, and that's the Open My Eyes blend, right? Yeah, oh, so good.
Nice.
But yeah, you can get it at rivalsons.com.
This immediately started to feel like an infomercial.
Yeah, rivalsons.com.
And if you buy it now, you'll get 3 additional ones.
Amazing.
Awesome. That's fun stuff. Guys, thanks so much for taking time to sit down with us today. We appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. I know it's kind of your day out, or it is your day off today, so we appreciate you coming in and looking forward to the show tomorrow.
Yeah.
You guys are out, you're out through September, right?
Excuse to talk about coffee.
There you go. And you're out through September.
We're
right?
really hunkering down and getting everything lined up, you know, for this next release.
Right.
You know,
Awesome.
in early 2020.
Look forward to it.
Yeah,
look forward
me
to the
too,
show
man.
tomorrow too. So, thanks again, guys.
Fantastic.
Great to
Thank
see
you,
you.
Sweetwater.
Yes, and thank you for joining us here today in Studio A at Sweetwater. I'm Mitch Gallagher.